Hi, and welcome back to All About the Garden. If you notice I'm glistening a little bit, it's because spring has sprung here in 9A and we are setting up a massive tomato trellis system. But before you go any further, don't look at that behind me and say, wow, there's no way I could do that. First of all, you can, but secondly, today's video is all about showing you exactly how you can do this in under an hour and go from no garden to gardening today. Let's go. We're starting with the first set of T-posts. I think they're about 1.5 feet off the white fence. We don't really need much room to get back there. And then we're spacing each set of T-posts about 4 feet from one another. So that gives the tomatoes about 1 foot to grow in either direction and will leave us about 2 feet to walk in so we can get into prune. As you can see, Ladybird, the golden retriever, is officiating for us, making sure we don't mess up. And that pretty much is all we did on that side. And then we start with the side closest to us here. You can see that we used one of the cross members. It's just a 2x4 that will end up hanging between the posts. We use that as a guide. Again, 4 feet apart. So that makes them about 8 feet from one another. And then each row is 4 feet from the next row. What you see all around me are a bunch of T-posts. And what we're doing is making 13 brand new tomato trellises. And the cool thing about it is you can do this on your own in under an hour, and you can do it starting from your yard, just like we did. So if you don't have a garden when you're watching this video, you can have a garden an hour after you're done. Come check it out. Step one, as you can see behind me, is we covered every inch of the ground with cardboard. And I want you to take a look at what we started with, and I'll show you how we actually do this process. It's full winter, and so a lot of the grass is kind of gone, and we've purposely neglected this area, but this is just what used to be yard at one point, and we're not going to spend any time preparing this area. We're just going to cover it with cardboard and a layer of mulch. Check this out. The first of basically 2 steps is to cover the yard with a layer of cardboard. You'll notice I'm making sure the cardboard overlaps by quite a bit, just to make sure that it's a total blackout. We don't want any light getting through, because that's what's going to make sure that everything underneath it dies and doesn't come back. And the step after this, you'll notice I'm going to put about 6 to 8 inches of mulch on top of this cardboard. So make sure everything overlaps, make sure no light gets through, and then you're going to come in with 6 to 8 inches of mulch on top of your cardboard. So basically what you just saw was Jen and I setting up an entire garden, and what's behind me is ready to plant. I purposely went to the store and got bags and bags of soil. It's not the most cost-effective way to do it, but it is the fastest way. I have compost bins over there, and I could use compost. I also have chickens that I could pull compost and soil out of. But today I wanted to take you through this process in a way that if you've never gardened before, you'll take a look at it and say, I can do this. 2 T-posts, a 2x4 with some holes drilled in it, strapped to the top, free cardboard, mulch, and 3 bags of soil. It's important to me today to show you that you have everything you need to start a garden today. And I hope it kind of inspires you. Now that we have the cardboard down and we layered everything with mulch, the next thing is to put in the soil. You'll notice Jen and I, we're working as a team here, and I am pulling the mulch out of the way until we get all the way down to cardboard. And then Jen is coming in behind me. She's putting 3 bags of soil in each one of these. So it's about 1.5 feet wide and about 8 feet long for each trellis. And we found that 3 bags of soil gave us a good 3 to 4 inches of compost on top. And that worked well for us. So here we are, just working our way down the rows. All right, I'm standing in the last bed that we have to fill. And before I cover it up with soil, I wanted you to take note of how we prepared before we put soil down on the ground. So you'll notice that I took quite a bit of care to get all of the mulch out of here. And that's because plants don't grow in mulch. So I want everything that comes in contact with the roots to be soil, not this mulch. We also get mulch fresh from a local tree service, and it is very, very raw, meaning not broken down in any way. This was probably cut off of a tree about 5 days ago, and it has had no time to break down in any way, so we want to keep that away from the plant roots. Here we are putting in 3 bags of soil. Ours is a local place, Living Earth. It's organic, of course. You can do something like this, or if you were setting up a bunch of these, you could also look at a local soil supply place and see if you can't order this by the yard to cut down on some of the cost. But we wanted to show you what it would look like if maybe you were doing 1. You could easily do this with 3 bags of good quality organic soil. And the super satisfying look at all 13 beds set up. Today we're making tomato trellises, but whether you're making tomato trellises or you're just putting in a new garden, the principle is the same. Number 1, we covered the ground and we didn't till it. It saved us a ton of time, but it also protected the soil underneath, because the soil underneath is something that we want to eventually tap into. But we want to start a garden today, and the way that we're doing it is covering the ground and then covering with mulch, but we're not going to plant with mulch. And I'm also going to show you a little bit about this trellis system that we've used over and over for all kinds of different things. It's relatively cost effective. It's very, very fast. So it starts with a couple of T-posts. And you can see behind me, we're actually setting up 13 garden beds today. And I think the whole thing, start to finish, is going to take us a little less than maybe 3 hours. That includes lunch and going to the store. So starts with 2 T-posts that I've driven into the ground. And the next thing that I did is I drilled a hole in the T-posts. Now the T-posts have this, they're called T-posts because they have this T shape, right? If you looked at it from the top, you'd be able to see that it was shaped like a T. And this fin's gonna get in the way. So follow me down here. I took a simple 2x4 and I cut a slit into it so that it would fit over that lip. I drilled a hole in the T-post and I drilled a matching hole in the wood. If you want to use I'm using a bolt and a wing nut because it's really easy to just, I don't have to have tools in my hand to get the wing nut off. I can do it by hand and move these things around whenever I want to, right? But you can also just do it with a, like a lag bolt directly into the wood once you've drilled the hole, and save yourself time probably. And this just gives you an idea of how I'm cutting that groove in the 2x4s. I'm setting up 4 at a time. If any longer than that, they get a little bit hard to manage. So I'm just basically hogging out a big chunk out of that 2x4 so it'll nest easily over the T-post. All right, basically, we cut that slot, and that's because it's gonna fit over the back of that T-post like that, and that way it'll get pulled flush. And then I got the drill between my legs. There we go. Oh, and I drilled a hole through the T-post. Just like that.
Awesome.
Jen and I working our way down the row, attaching the 2x4s. This is using the lag bolt just directly through the T-post into the 2x4. We have 8 of our 13 trellises completely up, and we even have tomatoes in the ground already. I want to show you one more way that you can attach the wood across the top between the 2 T-posts in case you don't want to try to drill through the metal. So I'm going to show you an easy way to get that done. Then I'll show you how we stake it into the ground so that you have a string running from the ground to the board on the top that you can wrap your tomato around to support it. Let's go. As an alternative to drilling through anything, you can use some kind of wire. In this case, I'm using a galvanized wire because I don't want to worry about it rusting, but it's certainly nothing heavy duty. You can probably use just about any wire that's flexible enough that you can really kind of wrap around. I went with kind of a figure 8 pattern. The nice thing about those T-posts is they have these little kind of bumps along the back that catch the wire as you wrap it around so the 2x4 can't move downwards. And this actually works really, really well. It's quick and easy, and once you get to the end, once you've wrapped it around enough, you can basically just bend the wire back and forth and snap the wire off. So it really requires no tools. So Jen holds one side as I set one end up, and then come back to the other side and get that done. So here's kind of a close-up of what this looks like. Again, you can see those bumps that I'm talking about, and I kind of start there. So I'll get a good, establish a good little hook around that bump, and then start working in a bit of a figure 8 pattern, just so I'm probably doing it overkill. You may not need to do it this many times, but
I didn't want it to move. So, and then you can see I'm just working the wire back and forth so it naturally snaps off, and then tucking it in so it doesn't poke us as we go through. Now it's time to give our tomatoes something to grow on, some support, and we're gonna do that with an 8-inch garden stake and rope. So I like to bend the top of those garden stakes. They're a little bit straight for my liking, but you don't necessarily have to do that. I've got that rope tied to the stake already. I'm gonna hammer it into the ground. Be careful not to hit that rope as you do this, because you can sometimes break that string. I've certainly done that before. And then I'll take it from the ground and wrap it up and over the 2x4. You'll notice there's slack in that rope, and that's by design. So I've got all the slack at the top as opposed to the bottom, and I'm tying it in a certain way so that it's gonna allow me later on to undo that knot there. And when the tomato reaches the top of the 2x4, I can undo the rope and then let the tomato plant kind of droop down till the plant is in the shape of a J. And what that does is buys us an extra maybe foot and a half on trellis length. So droop the plants down and get some more space to grow in. And you'll see I'm gonna continue through on each one. I'm doing 6 plants per 8-foot trellis. So they've got some good space to grow laterally, side to side, and then between each other as well. It shouldn't be overcrowded, should have plenty of airflow. At long last, we're ready to start planting some tomatoes. Check out this little seedling. You'll notice I take those 2 little leaves on the bottom. Those are those kind of dicot leaves. Those won't do you any good. And look at that root ball. These plants are gonna do great. Very little transplant shock as we're putting in. And it's time to start planting. I wanted to show you really quickly that I'm taking care to orient the stakes, I guess, across the bed as opposed to between one another. And the reason I'm doing that is because I want to be able to put the plant right up next to the string as close as possible, because as soon as it gets long enough, I want to start wrapping it up that string. Now, I'm showing you these little hairs along the tomato stem. Those hairs, any of those that you bury, will become roots. So I'm making sure that I'm grounding this thing out. I'm putting it down as deep as it can possibly go into that 3 to 4 inches. And that's gonna make sure that not only the roots that have already grown are gonna have lots of soil to contact, but also all those little baby hairs along that stem are gonna create new roots. So we're gonna have a big, robust root ball with plenty of ability to uptake nutrients. You can see I'm working with the dibber, going down the row. This is the best part, right? This is what we do all the work for, and it's super satisfying. And these things just plug right in. I can pop them out really easily. Again, using that, the dibber is nice, and you can use a stick, you can use your thumb. The idea is just that the hole that I'm putting the little seedling into is very similarly sized to the root ball itself. I'm opening it up just a little bit, making sure that I'm all the way down to the bottom as far as I can get. And you'll notice that it's a good 2 inches below, maybe 1.5 inches below the surface of the soil. I am leaving a bit of an indentation too. You may not be able to see it there, but that way when we do water, it tends to run toward the seedling itself. And then just rinse and repeat. And we did this for 13 beds. It's pretty epic now that it's all put together, but again, this video is all about encouraging you to create something like this of your own in whatever way that works best for you. Maybe it's not tomatoes, maybe it's something else. Maybe they don't necessarily need the string support, but this is just to encourage you again to just start a garden. Put soil down. You don't need to tear up the ground. You saw that one went in really nice and deep. So there's going to be lots of soil contact on all those kind of microfilament hairs around the soil. And that gives you a better idea of seeing a bit of an indentation around the plant. So that's nice. So if you spend much time listening to us or watching our videos, you're going to start hearing us kind of repeat these things over and over. I hope a video like this is encouraging to you, that when you see it, you feel like, oh man, I could do that. And you don't have to be a master gardener. Maybe you're an intermediate gardener. Maybe this is your first garden ever, but I want you to know that you can do something like this, and it's an hour away from starting your own garden. You may not get the best results in the world the first time around, but at least you've got a basis to get started. You know, one of our best friends, who probably has heard this more than anyone else, he came over as we were doing this and he said, man, is that all you have to do? I said, yeah, that's all you have to do. Cover up the pasture with cardboard, put mulch on top, bring in some soil, backfill it with some soil, and get going. And you know what? He did it. It's interesting because I guess maybe seeing it put it into reality for him. But he did it, and he's having success of his own. So it's really encouraging to see somebody being able to go from zero to a garden using this method in a short period of time. And so I hope that encourages you too. I mean, you can take, or at least begin to take control of your food supply in small ways. And we're going to continue to do that in our garden, and we'd encourage you to do it in yours as well.
There you have it, our massive 13 bed tomato trellis system. Again though, I want to remind you as we leave you today that the point of this is not to show you how cool that is. The point of this is to show you that you can start gardening today. I would not recommend you start with 13 tomato trellises, but you can start with one. If you don't want to do a tomato trellis, no big deal. You can start with cardboard right on your own grass, mulch, and a couple bags of soil, and you are in gardening business. So I hope today was inspiring for you. I hope that you learned enough to feel like you could get started on your own. And I just encourage you to go ahead and start gardening. So thank you for joining us today. If you enjoyed the video, think about hitting that subscribe button, tell your friends about us, and definitely put your questions in the comment section below. We will do our very best to answer them for you, and we'll see you next time on All About the Garden.